Hey everybody, thanks for stopping in and taking a peek at one of my reviews. I wanted to review something that I've been asked about, and that's the Wild Turkey 70th year release. This being 2024, just the end of it. This has been released this year, and it is to commemorate Jimmy Russell's 70th year with Wild Turkey. He's the master distiller for Wild Turkey and has been there obviously 70 years. And it is a very approachable 101 proof, 8 years old, really sits with the old Wild Turkey 101, which used to be age stated at 8 year, and very affordable price. It's I think retail right around $40, depending on your market. It's going to be below or above that. And so right next to it, I've got some newer Wild Turkey 101, so we'll do a comparison there, and then also just a really budget-friendly 10-year, the Russell Reserve, their higher end lineup at a little bit lower proof at 90 proof. So I figure we'll tuck into these and see how they compare, and you can decide on your own what you would find on the market and what you'd want to pick up. So without further ado, let's get into nosing this one. It's got a great nose. I'm getting a decent amount of oak for this price point and year. It's a great cherry on that. It's a little bit of toffee, some vanillas. It's a really fantastic nose for that price point. There's a little bit of kind of a desserty fruitiness in there, a little bit of apple as it warms up a little bit in my hand. We'll pick up a bit of vanilla, it seems like. It's a pretty traditional scent there. Get a little warmer there, a little bit sweeter, a little bit fuller. That's great. Green apple really carries over inside of that. Good amount of oak. It's got a good sit inside the palate. Not the thickest thing in the world, but shouldn't be at 101 proof in only 8 years. There's a good amount of oak to that. There's the cherry. I'm getting a lot of that dessertiness on there. The oak isn't acrid. It's not sitting with a tannic feeling on my tongue. I think that what I remember of their original Wild Turkey, I think this is definitely going to be able to hold its own, but we'll check that here in just a second. Second sip. It's going to be, really fills the mouth really well. It keeps with the fruit notes. There's a little bit of the baking spices, a little nougat. Vanilla and caramel are always definitely there in a Wild Turkey of this kind of age. I'm not getting a lot of young notes, which is really nice. Other releases from their commemorative lines have been at lower proofs. I think it was great to do this 101. That's what Jimmy tends to like. And I love that the age statement is back to 8 years. So that means a minimum of 8 years in this, and I know the blends have had different years inside of that. But it's really nice to see that that's back to at least an 8-year blend inside of it. Whereas Wild Turkey 101, they dropped the age statement a while back and started blending in some 6 years into it. But yeah, that's really very approachable. I think it drinks about as proof, maybe a bit higher, but I feel like for the flavor, it's got a really good amount of flavor at 101. I feel like it wasn't the highest proof stuff that's been watered down a lot. Yeah, that's really great. I'm going to do a little quick palate cleanse, and we'll get into the regular Wild Turkey 101. I do also off to the side have a bottle of older Wild Turkey, not a ton older, but it was the label before this. I've done a comparison of that before, of the brand new stuff versus a bit older. The cork broke on that, so I decanted it. So we'll do a really quick tasting of that, but I wanted you to be able to taste through the things that are available to you now and should be pretty easy to find depending on your market and whatnot. So getting into the regular Wild Turkey that you can pretty much find anywhere. The nose doesn't stand up as much. It's a bit more ethanol on the nose. I got very little ethanol on the nose there. It's a bit drier. It's not as full. There's a fruit note on there, a bit of that green apple. Not as much oak. Nose is still nice for a budget whiskey. It's not horrible. That's where the palates, I think, are really going to be the main difference between these two, and I was correct. This is a bit more on that tannic side. It doesn't taste as full. It's not as pleasant of notes going on inside of there. I would say that if you were to tell me I could only drink one of these for the rest of my life, I would definitely pick the 70th anniversary over the traditional 101. And I'm glad I'm doing this comparison because I haven't done this comparison before. I've just had these two at separate times. This is a fresh crack. I opened it right beforehand just to get a little bit of air on the glass. This one has sat on my shelf for a little bit, so that should normally make it taste a little bit sweeter and a little bit more approachable, and I'm not getting that in comparison to this. Still fine for the price point that you find regular Wild Turkey 101 at, but not nearly as appealing. This drinks lesser proof than this one. Obviously the proofs are the same, but it is sitting with less finish and less carryover. But I didn't find anything on this palate that I disliked, and there's definitely things inside here, that tannicness and that bitterness that's inside of there. Way less cherry, not nearly as sweet. You do have to keep in mind, and that's why we cleanse our palate a little bit, that if the first whiskey that you have will affect the next whiskey that you drink. But I wanted to start here because I wanted to have an unadulterated palate to just test this out, because primarily what this review is for isn't just the comparison, but just to let you know if this is a kind of a purchase or pass on the 70th. And as of right now, I would definitely say it's a purchase. So I want to quickly jump over to the decantered older Wild Turkey, as I did find this to be much more approachable than the new release. And for anyone that follows in the dusty market and whatnot, old 80s, 70s Wild Turkey is phenomenal, whether that be the opinions that people have that it gets better in a bottle, which technically spirits aren't supposed to, but it does tend to lend to that, or if it had to do with the old recipes and the old wood and different things that were used, recipe being the same, but the old ingredients, I should say. So this is, I want to say a 2017, maybe 2015, 17, somewhere around in there. Nose is similar to the 101. Really similar. Do a quick palate cleanse, forgot to do that. Those are similar. I do get a bit more fruit forward on this than the newer 101, as well as a bit less on the tannic. Still, this is definitely the clear winner over an older bottle of Wild Turkey 101, but not that old. I wouldn't at all call that a dusty by any means. It's just the label that was previous to this one. So I just wanted to try that to see if there was much difference there, and I would say that we can leave that kind of out of the lineup. Do a quick cleanse, and now what I want to do is we're jumping down in proof. Normally I'd like to move proof up, but I wanted to start here, and there's really only about 10 proof difference, 11 proof difference, so I don't feel that bad. I sniff my water sometimes. I don't feel that bad about changing proofs on these. So the Russell Reserve 10-year, Russell Reserve being Wild Turkey's higher end release. This is also guaranteed to be at least 10 years, but they did proof it down to 90 proof versus that 101. And it isn't a single barrel. You'll see the red label with white writing is their single barrel 110 proof release. This is different. This is a more around that $45 to $55 range, usually pretty easy to find depending on your market. I think that normally, previous to this review, we'll see, this is something that I consider to be a very approachable, good, affordable whiskey to get yourself into a bit of age with that 10 years. Nose on here is more enjoyable to me than the new Wild Turkey. We're gonna have, there's the cherry. It is, you can definitely smell that it's not releasing as much as the other two. There's some oak on that. Good fruity notes inside of that. Bit of toffee on that whole, and a bit of baking spices inside of that. Bit of bubble gum. All right, let's tuck into this. That's a, I don't like to use the word more approachable whiskey. That's definitely drinks its proof. It drinks far less than the other two, but I find very few flaws inside of that. There's a bubble gum note inside of there. The oak is coating the tongue on the side and hitting a bit more astringent or tannic than the Russell 70th, or sorry, the Wild Turkey 70th, but not as I guess kind of process tasting as what I was getting out of the Wild Turkey 101. Definitely the thinnest of the three. It definitely drinks its proof. Like I was saying, more water has been added to this, but I think this is, for what I like, which tends to be an older whiskey, I think that this is very approachable, and I think it's still going to stay in my lineup as a good option for, you know, a budget whiskey similar in the range of like a Rare Breed 10-year, or sorry, not Rare Breed, Eagle Rare 10-year, or something along those lines. But in comparison, I would highly say, if I'm comparing all four whiskeys, hands down goes to the Wild Turkey 70th. It is, I'll give it one last try since we've kind of adulterated the palate through the lineup to see if it still holds up. But as the lineup went, much sweeter, much bolder. All the notes were much more cohesive with the cherry, the sweeter oak, the less tannic oak that was happening inside of it. Yeah, to go from this lower proofer now and jump back into this, much bolder. Proof is there. Oak, surprisingly, had only being listed as an 8-year, and that could be the water versus the 10-year on that lower proof. Oak is much more forward. Cherry is really sitting in there. Fruit notes are in there. I don't get any of that bubble gum that I was getting over on this side. This is a really, and the finish is just continuing to go with this in comparison to something a little bit thinner like that. I would say if you have it in your market, or if you've been wondering about it, if it's worth getting, I would highly recommend going and picking this up over the other options if you see them out there. I wouldn't necessarily hunt this down and pay the, you know, 100 to 150 that some people are thinking they want to ask for this. But if you can find it in retail, I think they said there was going to be over 80,000 to 100,000 of these released. So it is something that isn't nearly as hard to find as some of the Wild Turkey releases. So I would say, yeah, it's a purchase. So I would go ahead, if you can find it, get that. I would get it over stocking the shelf with Wild Turkey 101 for not that much of a price difference, and hope that I helped out. And thank you so much for tuning in to my channel and tuning into this review. So